right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Chats. We're so excited all of you have decided to join us this afternoon, and we're really looking forward to sharing some strategies you can use as district leaders as well as teachers to give students ownership of their data and their learning. So I want to start by introducing everyone. My name is Kristen Spinella, and I am a member of the Model Schools team at the MORIC, and I have here with me Heather Schaefer. I don't know if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Heather Schaefer. It's nice to meet everyone.
And Jenny, would you like to come off of mute and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Walgory-Lee. I'm the Educational Data Team Leader here at the RIC.
So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started today with a quote that we thought really would help set the tone of what we're talking about today and really get us all in the mindset. So as you can see here on the screen, the quote that we're sharing says, when students set their own goals, they take responsibility and ownership of their learning. So our focus for the next hour is really on how can we get students to take ownership of their goals, their learning, and how can that ownership then help with motivation and really moving them forward, not only with their academic goals, but also personal goals and life goals. And before we jump into all that, it's important we know our why. So why we're talking about student data is to formalize self-analysis and goal setting. So again, we want to make sure that students are looking at what they're doing, where they're going, and what they need to do to get there. We're also looking at ways that we can help teachers select appropriate resources, instructional designs, informative assessment strategies. So we know that it's not just a matter of how we're going to get this students to understand the goals, but also what are we doing as teachers to support them to then move forward. We're also looking at great tools for conversation between teachers, students, and parents. And we're going to share some information later in this webinar that is going to be helpful resources that you can use both to have conversations with students, but also that you can use to have conversations with parents. And then students can also use at home to have conversation with their parents. So again, putting that ownership back with them. All right, so let's talk about how we start meaningful conversations around the data that we're collecting. And one way we can do this is through data protocols. So in your slide deck, you will have a simple data protocol that you can help to look objectively at the data that you've been collecting. Some of you may already be familiar with this protocol, but the questions that are presented here will help to guide your conversation between the stakeholders and keep the focus on the data. So when you have this slide deck, Heather did share the link in the chat. But in here, we have included a printable PDF as well as an interactive Jamboard. So those are both there as, again, a resource for you to help have those conversations, maybe with your teachers, with coworkers, with students, really around the data that you're collecting. All right, and now I'm going to kick it over to Jenny, and she's going to talk about the administrative level and how you can really talk and have conversations around your data.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you again for being here today. So we're excited to have you here and start these conversations around how we incorporate children into the discussions about their own data. And that really starts at the building level with our administrators. So there's a couple of things that we can do as building level administrators to help in these conversations. And the first thing that we like to do is to gather 3 pieces of data. So if we have a conversation about a child or children that is coming up, that we want to use 3 pieces of data. And these 3 pieces of data fall into 4 categories, which is a little confusing, but I'll explain. So the first thing we want to do is we want to always bring a sort of quantitative data to our conversations. This data can include things such as maybe state test scores on the New York State assessments. It could include things like STAR assessments or iReady assessments, NWEA, AIMSweb, any of those type of data points that have quantitative or numbers associated with them. So we do want to bring a quantitative data to our conversations. In addition, however, we also want to bring qualitative data. And sometimes we can bring these qualitative data to our discussions and we get wrapped up in that data, right? We could have, if we're talking about a student, maybe a fifth grade student who's scoring a little bit lower than we expect on, let's say, a star reading assessment. And then maybe we get off topic and we're talking about that student and, maybe some struggles that they've been having in class. But sometimes that data can be very helpful. So if there's observation data, for example, that can be brought into the conversation, that is helpful to move the conversation along. So in my example of a fifth grader who's struggling perhaps with reading, maybe the teacher brings in the fact that the student is mixing up letters when they're doing some writing in class. It might indicate that there's a bigger issue or something else that we can look into. But as long as that qualitative data again, is specific to the student and specific to what the conversation is, it can really help to drive that conversation. In addition, we want to bring in both formative and summative data. So summative data could be like those New York State assessment data, Regents exams, it could be 3 through 8 test exam scores, but also we want to bring in formative stuff. So what are the students doing in their everyday classrooms that we're collecting that we're noticing about those students? So again, we want to bring in quantitative, qualitative data that falls under the category of both formative and summative. And that will give us a really great point of view about the student, because a lot of times we'll always say that the student is more important than the score, which is absolutely true. That's why we want to bring in as much as we can about them. So once we have that data collected, what do we do with it? Well, we usually bring it into some sort of maybe a child study team or maybe a grade level conversation. And the first thing that I always say is that when we're looking at the data, we need to focus on the what of the data. So what is the data telling us? As teachers, we're really good at like diagnosing things and we always jump to the why first. Oh, well, the student is scoring that because yada, yada, yada. But what we really need to focus on is just what is the data actually telling us? Is the student below grade level? Are they above grade level? Have they been making progress? Have they not been making progress? So the first thing again is to focus on the what. Oftentimes, if you've had any conversations as an administrator surrounding data, you might notice that once in a while you might have a resistor, somebody who doesn't believe in the data or has a reason that the data is the way that it is. And so to do and have those conversations, it's always good to have in the back of your pocket some redirectors, some comments such as, well, let's look at question number whatever. What did the student need to know or be able to do as a result of that question? And that takes it back and a little bit of the ownership off the teacher, or a little bit of, if the teacher's resisting a little bit, it brings it back to the actual question. Well, hey, let's talk about what the student needed to know to be able to do that. So a really good, again, as an administrator, having that in your back pocket to have those conversations is really important. The next thing, as we're talking about the data, is then we need to talk about what the strategies are and what the impact is that those strategies have. So for those of you who have MTSS systems and you're keeping track of your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 data, you want to know what the interventions have been used and what impact that they have had. So that always helps us to make sure that we've matched our intervention with what the student is struggling with. Again, in those conversations, another like little thing to have in your back pocket to help the conversations and move them along. It's just being able to synthesize the conversation by saying things like, so what you're saying is an easy conversation starter, just again, to keep those conversations moving, but on topic. Once we get to that point where we have like a plan or we're starting to develop a plan, again, another thing that we can talk to the teachers is about is like, let's review your action plan. Let's make sure that you're meeting your goals. So once we have that information, we have it all set. Again, these are just great conversation starters. Talk about them with individual teachers, with groups of teachers, so that everybody knows where they're at. And quick tip, always making sure that you have that information documented can be a really great. So have it documented, like on this day, we plan to do XYZ and we're going to check back in on this date. That way everybody knows what everybody knows. I was in a meeting earlier this morning and someone was like, I love that this group, when we leave for the day, we know when we're meeting again, number one, and we know what we're going to talk about. And, that really does help take a little bit of a little stress off everybody's plate during the day. And finally, if you are an administrator and you're having trouble with getting buy-in from your teachers, it's always good to say, well, who are you going to share this data with? I had a conversation with a district a little while ago, and my question to them is they were talking about RTI and what they were doing in RTI, and they had a great process for RTI. And my question to them was, have you shared these processes back with the actual teachers who have the student as a full-time student in their classroom? And the answer was no. So the conversations were only going one way. And the RTI teachers were kind of saying, well, the classroom teachers don't do XYZ, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when we dug in a little bit farther, they just hadn't been sharing the data that they were doing back with the teacher so that they could all be in sync. So asking them, who are you going to share this with? Are you going to share it with students? Are you going to share it at a parent teacher conference? Are you going to send it home at every 10-week benchmark? Knowing that and having a plan of when and how we're going to share it out can and with who can be very important as well. And so when we're talking about teachers and we're looking at their data, teachers can also use their data in a variety of ways. And when we're using the teacher, and we know that teachers are super busy, right? So we want to make it super easy for them. So you want to have a process to gather that data and to say, all right, what data are we actually going to look at this year? I find in a lot of the products that we support, like AimsWeb, NWEA, iReady, STAR, they have a lot of reports. And so one thing we can do as administrators to help our teachers is to say, this year, we're only looking at the XYZ report, whatever port and whatever product you use, or maybe it's we're only going to look at our science of reading data, and we're using that to make this progress and track our progress. So helping the teachers to know exactly what data they're going to gather so that they're not inundated with so much data is just like out of their, it just seems really overwhelming. So if they know they're looking at one piece of data or like they're collecting 3 small pieces of data and when they're collecting it really can help them. And this data, then it's important that we use it. So once we have a conversation with the teachers and they know exactly what data they're going to use, that, as I mentioned before, they have a plan before they leave a meeting and that they know when they're going to use it, what instructional changes they're going to make, and then when they'll revisit it as well. And finally, we just track those changes. If we're progress monitoring, we look at the student, how they're doing. I always think it's really important to just remind teachers that as we're collecting this data on students, remember that we want to give interventions. We want to give instruction, time to take place. I had a great conversation with a teacher a little bit ago who was like, oh, well, I progress monitor every day. And I said, well, why? That's a lot of data you're collecting that's taking away from instructional time. The child doesn't have enough instruction to really make a change. So giving that 1 or 2 weeks between your progress monitoring really can help. And finally, there are definitely some different ways that we can work with teachers together. Teachers can look at this data, of course, in small groups. So if they're doing it as a grade level team or maybe as a curriculum team, they can do it individually or collaboratively, although I always love to have people look at things collaboratively. And you can always have them as well look at, maybe interest-based groups. So maybe there is we're going to look at all the students who are maybe struggling with number sense, and we're going to look at their number regardless of grade, right? We're going to look at that topic and we're going to look at those students, and we're going to have our teachers who are really interested in helping students on number sense, for example. So we can really group our teachers and how they look at data based on their different needs. And now I'm going to move over to Heather to talk a little bit more.
All right. So one of the things that we want to do with our students is we want to give them voice and choice in their learning. And we can do this in lots of different ways, right? So we can give them choice in like what they're learning. And one example of a way to do this would be like through a playlist or a choice board. We can also give them a variety of ways of how they learn. And so an example of this could be like what we do with project-based learning. Giving them a voice and choice and when they learn would be like flipped classroom. And then where they learn would be like flexible seating. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we can give students voice and choice, and we don't have to do them all at the same time. So think about your classroom, think about your students' needs, think about how you can empower your students to have a voice and choice and become those self-directed learners. So one of the reasons that we want to give our students choices is so that they can make their own decisions and they're not always relying on the teacher, because we do want them to become lifelong learners. So let's talk specifically about the students and about how they track their data. So involving students can have a significant impact on their success, and increasing their responsibility and providing opportunities for them to do goal setting empowers them and increases their achievement. So we're going to watch a video here. But before I play the video, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of context. So in the video, you're going to see a teacher working with some students, and they're going to be working on goal setting. So you're going to see some engaging strategies about goal setting, the benefits of goal setting, how they track their data, and of course, then celebrating the growth. So as you're watching this, kind of think about your own classroom, think about your own students, and how you might want to engage your students in data chats.
Provide content, I provide resources. I realize that I am a facilitator. I provide content, I provide resources, I teach, but the kids really have to be invested in their own learning for this to work.
Research shows that involving students in their learning can have a significant impact on their success. How can you make this happen? Tip 1, get student buy-in by setting goals.
It's important to have goals and expectations for what we want our students to achieve, and for them to know that there is this goal that they have to work towards.
I like to make my goals, and iReady helps me with that because you can look at your goal, and if you see it's a little low, then you can work harder.
Tip 2, schedule data chats with students about their learning.
I think the data chats I have with my students do both help me build relationships with my students. They're aware of their own knowledge, how much they know themselves.
Taking the opportunity to look at the data and then share it with them so that they're aware, wow, my teacher's actually looking, my teacher actually knows what's happening. It helps to encourage them to want to do better.
We'd had plenty of chats. She would point out where I'd be weak in, and then I would just work on that until I could do better in that.
Tip 3, have students track their own data.
I like seeing my progress because it shows me how well I've been doing or if I need to improve. It feels good because it makes me feel that I'm learning more.
Tip 4, celebrate class progress and growth.
My teacher, when we have iReady tests and we have improved a bunch, then she'll go like, oh, this person grew from her last grade level.
I also really like to hype the students up and let them know that they've been working really hard and trying really hard, and they stay motivated because they want to improve when they understand what they're improving upon. For tips and tools to invest students in their learning, visit iReadyCentral.com.
All right. So one of the whys on why we want our students to track their own data can be shown by just taking a look at these two pictures here of signs that you might see as you're driving along the road, right? And I want you to sit back and I want you to think about which one of these signs would help you to better abide by the speed limit. And I'm sure you would agree that the one on the right would. And the reason for that is because it's giving you real-time data. Like me knowing that my speed is being checked by radar, okay, cool, I don't care, I'm gonna keep speeding. But if I see like maybe the speed limit is 20 because I'm in a school zone and this is showing me, hey, you're doing 29, I'm gonna hit the brakes immediately and slow down. And so giving that real-time data really shortens the feedback loop. And so the same happens with our students and looking at their own learning data. When they can see, progress monitoring, and they can see their progress on a fairly consistent basis, instead of like having to wait, let's say, until a report card comes out. It shortens that feedback loop for students, and it encourages them to keep moving forward. So when we're doing data chats with our students, one of the really important things to do is to make sure we're using metacognitive strategies with our students. And so we want our students to learn how to learn in order to become those self-directed learners. We want them to develop agency. We want them to have access to analyze and monitor their own data. So a lot of times in schools, that data is kind of kept private to, the teachers and the administrators, and it's not really shared directly with students. So we want to open up that opportunity for students to be able to have access to their data so that they can track it. And then last but not least, we want them to develop personal learning goals and track and evaluate them, with the teacher serving as the mentor. So, we can do this with students of any age. They don't have to be, older students. They can be very young students too. And the teacher is really going to serve as that mentor. So you can sit down with your students, you can have conversations with them, and you can really show them how it's done until they become self-sufficient in doing it themselves. So the real benefit of this is that the students see that the effort that they're putting in has results, and it helps them to persevere and have that growth mindset. So, when they struggle, they can try again. So we know that it can be hard with your schedules to be able to put this in to your schedule. So you want to make sure you carve out a little bit of time for students to look at their data. And this can be done in so many different ways. A couple examples are like during morning work or exit tickets. And it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be complex. So you could be asking your students, look at this one piece of data, right? And what did you do well on? What do you want to work on? And then have them write a goal and write down their steps or actions that they're going to take to meet that goal. But if you're not, doing it during morning work or exit tickets, another choice would be to possibly set up like a station rotation model in your school, or in your classroom rather, where you have different stations set up and you can have multiple activities going on at the same time. So maybe you're sitting down with a small group of students and you're doing a data chat with them, or maybe one-on-one, while your other students are busy, doing other things. They can be on computers, like looking at personalized content, taking personalized assessments, doing targeted instruction, or even collaborative projects. So here are a couple examples of data tracking. And I know it can probably be hard to see on your screen. So, I encourage you to go back and look at the slide deck later on when we're finished here, and zoom in on these pictures, but I'll kind of try and talk through it a little bit. So in the picture on the left, you'll see a student looking at their NWEA test, and it's saying that their score is blank. I'm really proud of myself because I tried my best. I'm best at blank, and I need to improve in blank. And then there's a sheet on the right where the teacher encourages them to work towards, whatever goal they set for themselves and what they want to improve on. And they do this by watching videos, and they shade in, the little gumball machines as they watch each video, and they can earn prizes. So that's one example of data tracking. And this can look different in, every classroom, depending on what you want your students to focus on. The picture in the middle is our class WIGS. WIGS stands for Wildly Important Goal. So here, they're really making their data visible because they're putting it on their classroom door, right? So the whole school can see it. So the kids are really like building up that pride for their accomplishments. So here they're just tracking their multiplication fluency. And then on the right, there's another example of a WIG, but this one's more of a personal goal. So students can each come up with something different instead of working towards a class goal where they're all working on the same thing at the same time. So lots of different ways to track data. Another way you can track your data is with digital badges. And so I've included a badge tracker here, and I'll just show you an example of what that looks like. So this was taken from one of our March Badgeness classes that we offer every March. And it's a very simple way to award badges and track them by simply just dulling the color of the badges and then brightening it as they earn them. So you'll have a copy of this. You'll be able to go in and change out the badges for things that might be more appropriate for your class. But the directions are right here on the last slide to show you how to use it. So it's a very cool way to do it. And then also we've included a blog for how to create your own badges in Google Drawings. So you don't need to purchase any software. You can just do this all for free right in Google. Very easy and very fun and engaging for the students. It's a really visual way for them to track their data and to feel achievement. And your badges can be aligned to the standards. They can be aligned to your students' personal goals. And they're kind of like brag tags. I don't know if you've done brag tags in the classroom for like behavior, but they can also be aligned to academic goals as well. So very motivational. Another important piece of data chats is having reflective practices. And so lots of different ways to do this, but a couple examples are through digital portfolios, blogging, and so on. So if you're using technology, you can include all sorts of different formats. So not only can you have written things like you would on paper, but you can also include audio and video too, which can be very engaging for your students. So in this example here, you can see it's a Google site. And so the student had embedded their writing samples, and then they had a reflection on their writing at the bottom of each page. Another example for younger students would be Seesaw. Seesaw is great for this purpose as well. So Google Sites and Seesaw are two tools we definitely recommend for portfolios and blogging. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen, and she's going to share some resources with you.
Thank you so much, Heather. So Heather just gave you a wide variety of different ways that you can help your students to track their data. But when we come together as a group, when we started planning this webinar, we really wanted to make sure that you had something that you could walk away with and you could implement either with your teachers or directly with your students. So what we've done is we put together two different student data notebooks, one for an intermediate level and one for primary. And again, these copies are in the slide deck that has been shared with you. So there's a printable PDF version, but there's also a digital copy. So within this data notebook, there are different templates for your students to fill out to really help them track their data. So the beginning is all about getting to know your students and their personal interests. We put this in here because these are the ways that we can help motivate students. By knowing about the student as an individual and what their interests are, we can then tie that into our conversations about data and goal setting and even some of the celebrations that we're having. And then we work into my goals, my learning, and my victories. So you have a wide variety of templates in here. Please don't feel that you need to use all of these templates. We just wanted to give you some variety for you to choose from and kind of use what works best in your classroom. And these slides can be duplicated, they can be edited. Sorry, that didn't come out right. You can then edit them if you need to so that they work for your students. But again, it's something to get you started, and it's a resource for you to then feel like you have that next step following this webinar to get those conversations happening with your students. In addition to the notebooks, we also have some resources in the slide deck. Give Heather a moment to get back there for us. That ties into kind of what Jenny was mentioning about our local assessments and some of our intervention products that we support. So in this example, we've included reports about Freckle, IXL, and iReady. So as Jenny mentioned, a lot of these products have a wide variety of reports, which is amazing. But if you're not really sure what the reports are showing or not really sure how to read the reports or what to do with that data, that can be a little cumbersome. So what we've done is we've broken down each report into what that report will show you and then what you can do with that information more importantly. So what are those next steps you can take using that report to help guide you and guide your students? And again, these can be wonderful discussions to have with students. So you can pull up a lot of these reports, show them to your students, and have conversations around what they're doing in the intervention program or in that local assessment. We know a lot of times that the students have a hard time understanding the why behind being in these programs, and sometimes they might even just click through to finish. So by having these conversations, we're giving that authenticity and that why behind the program, which is then going to encourage students to put forth their best effort and give us accurate data when they're in that program and spending time there. All right, so I am going to pass it back over to Jenny now to kind of wrap us up.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So what we'd like you to do is think about all the different ways. We know we are inundated with data in our education world. So how could you use a data chat with either, if you're an administrator, with your teachers, or if you're a teacher with your students? And we'll give you a few seconds to kind of think through that. And if you feel comfortable, you can take yourself off mute and just share with us a little bit of ways that you think you could use this in your role in your school. And if you'd like to put in chat, please do that as well. We're a super quiet group today, which is okay. But I encourage you, as you move forward and you're thinking about data, how are you going to use it? How are you going to help kids to empower themselves? Because, you know, in New York State now, we have the social emotional learning benchmarks that have come out, and they're going to be a great opportunity, a great way to help kids develop agency and help them to, as Heather and Kristen talked about earlier, it helps them to develop voice and choice without really adding a lot of extra curriculum or instructional time to their day. But it really has a phenomenal impact on student learning. And Tanya, I'm reading your comment right now. Yeah, this can be done during morning work with the kids. We can sit down with one kid a day or a couple kids a day, something really quick, something simple. And if it's on the computer, it helps with those technology skills as well. So lots of options there. And remember, it just doesn't have to be, you know, like intermediate level kids or middle school level kids. This can be used with little kids, like our littlest of littles. I have seen them walking out of classroom and having a data chat with their teacher when the teacher says, hey, if you know how to use the long A, you know, slap the green marker on the green dot on your way out the door. And, you know, not only is she collecting good data, but then she's pulling kids aside as they're walking to their next special, just asking them, hey, what confused you on that, so that she can better help their learning. So lots of really great ways that we can help kids and help kids grow, and that's our goal. And so having said that, I'm going to throw it back over to Kristen.
And just quickly, Sarah, I love that idea of improving student mindset. And really, that's what we're trying to do, right? It's so much more about students' mindset and their ownership and them believing in themselves and them accomplishing these goals and empowering our students to be learners. And that, yes, is tied into data, but these conversations are so much more than that. So I love that you bring up that mindset piece. So again, thank you everyone for your time today. We really appreciate you taking the time out to have these conversations with us. If you are interested in learning more about any upcoming PD offerings, within your slide deck, you do have this sign up option to sign up for our monthly newsletter that goes out that highlights some of the next PD sessions that we have coming up. And it's a mixture of webinars, and sometimes we put on asynchronous courses. But if you're interested in just being in the know about what's up and coming and what you can look forward to, go ahead and sign up for that, and that will be directly put into your inbox. We also have our emails here. So if you have any questions or you're looking for support getting started, or maybe support with other resources that you would like to gather, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're all happy to help with this. And we are happy to support and provide any resources that we can. So if nobody has any other questions, And Heather and Jenny, if you have nothing else that you want to input, we again thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking with all of you and hopefully seeing you in some future sessions. Thank you, everyone.